Welcome to episode 7 of Conversations with a Martial Artist. My guest today is Will Mackay, a 35th generation Shaolin disciple, practitioner of Shaolin Kung Fu. He is a 10 times British Sanda Champion. Sanda is Chinese kickboxing for those that don't know. He also went on to claim silver at the World Sanda Championships, so incredibly high level practitioner, really interesting guy. He's also a professional stuntman, so a lot of what he does with the martial arts translates really well over to some of the work he's done there, and we talk a lot about some of these things. Recently he's transitioned to grappling, learning jiu-jitsu, so very well-rounded, interesting guy. I'll put all of his social media links in the description as well, so please do go check him out. Really interesting, very motivational, well worth a follow. Without further ado, please sit back and enjoy our conversation. Will, thank you very much for joining me. Much appreciated for you coming down. We've been training together for, I guess, a couple of months since I got back at Kingston Jiu-Jitsu. Mm-hmm. And then I think we were talking about it just now off camera. Your Instagram popped up and I didn't realize that you'd done all these crazy Shaolin, Sanda things. And it's super interesting. And it's not one that a lot of people, one, really know about or have a good understanding of, or two, it's not that common either. You don't get a lot of Sanda competitions around and things like that. So I thought it'd be really interesting to have you on. Would you talk a little bit to start us off about your background, like how you got into it and that kind of thing?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on the podcast, Tom. Appreciate that. Cheers.
Cheers.
With a drink too. Nice.
Yeah, priorities are in order here.
So background, I was studying fine art in London. Okay. Going to a lot of squat raves, taking a lot of drugs, a lot of ecstasy, a lot of drum and bass and techno. Could feel that I was having a good time, kind of hedonistic, but wasn't really doing anything more substantial, should we say, in my life. Okay. A friend of mine said that there's some real Shaolin monks who've been sent by the abbot, the head of the monastery in China, and they were going to open a school in the UK. And it's one of those sliding doors moments. I think I could have easily just ignored that. Yeah. Or I think when I was a teenager, I saw a program on Channel 4 late at night about the Shaolin monks. I was absolutely fascinated by it. So obviously the name Shaolin rung in my head. Yeah. And I'll never forget it. Went to my first class. The monk was there, couldn't speak any English. Okay. And all he knew was copy me. And obviously we didn't know any Kung Fu. So sat down on the floor, had to meditate for the first 15 minutes, cross-legged, my back was screaming. And some energy about this man walking past us. I could feel his aura or vibe or something unusual about him. And I thought, whatever this man's been doing up a mountain for 20 years, I want a piece of that.
I'm into it.
Yeah. Just had an energy about him. And couldn't walk for about 3 days after the first class. It was so intense, militant training. And it was like a light bulb moment. Something went off in my head and I thought, this is what I want to do. And here we are 20 years on. Damn. With quite a wild ride. But forever thankful for my teachers, Shifu Yanze and Shifu Yanlei from the Shaolin Temple UK. Okay. Yeah.
And where is that temple based in the UK? I know it's somewhere in London.
Yeah, it's Tufnell Park, North London. Okay. Took a few years for them to secure a spot. It's a beautiful place, training area, and they've really encapsulated the Shaolin ethos, the Buddhist elements, meditation rooms, fountains, lovely murals, and it's like a slice of Shaolin in London. Yeah,
so that's blessed, really cool. And that's still up and running at the moment.
Still up and running, yes.
And you still go there and train, or because I know you're mainly focused now on grappling, right?
Yeah. I mean, I ticked a lot of boxes when it came to my goals with stand-up fighting. I'm 43 now. I don't have a desire as much to get elbowed in the teeth.
Sure, fair enough.
So I kind of moved my focus to BJJ. Obviously, that's where I met you. Yeah. But I still pop in now and again. And really cool. Forever grateful for the path that they led me on, for sure. Yeah.
And for people listening that don't know about Shaolin, because Shaolin is one of those ones which has either you have no idea what people are talking about, or it's one of those ones they got the idea of, these crazy monks up a mountain somewhere, kicking each other in the balls and doing all the like iron shirt and things like that. How realistic is that interpretation?
Yeah, I get asked that question a lot, and it's a good question to ask too, because there's a cultural difference between Chinese culture and UK culture.
Yeah, hugely.
A respect issue, respecting your elders and stuff. But within that, unfortunately, there's a lot of charlatans, a lot of snake oil salesmen, and a lot of people. I forget the name of the MMA fighter. The Chinese guy's calling a lot of these masters out, and he's getting in trouble, and the government are sanctioning him. But he's doing a good thing. He's going around and saying, "Does this work? Is this guy talking bullshit?"
Yeah.
But having said that, there are, from my experience, from my two masters, very legitimate masters who have dedicated their lives for decades in the mountains in China, practicing every day. And, when you see some of the stuff that they're capable of, mind, body, and spirit connected, it is almost magical,
Yeah. You see how it gets carried away like that from like a more historical sense, where there was less like understanding of things like that. Yeah. People being able to use their bodies in the way like that. You can see how some of the mysticism can get run away a little bit.
Especially when people start talking about esoteric matters. We study Qigong as well. Yeah. And for the Western mind, it's very hard. Well, not very hard. It's not as normal to talk about energy. What does it mean?
No.
How do you transfer it? How do you get more of it? And the practice of internal, external training is very normalized out in the Eastern culture. You see old people practicing their Qigong in the parks every day, and that's just the way of life. But it's kind of harder for us to get our head around here. Maybe less so now. It's becoming more, more people like myself are delving into it. But yeah, I mean, I've seen some phenomenal stuff from our masters, and it keeps the spirit of Shaolin alive, shall we say? Yeah,
awesome. And how acrobatic is it as a style? Because it's primarily strikes and throws and things, right?
Yeah, I'd say that Shaolin training itself is kind of splintered into two parts.
Yep.
Obviously, they've got the health benefits, the meditation, and the Qigong, as we talked about. But then there's, from the competitive side, there's the Taolu, which is the forms and weapons performances, which can be very acrobatic. And then they have the Sanda or Sanshao, which is the fighting combat aspect. And that was the path that I trained in. When you get the young kids that start from maybe 4 years old, they're heavily into the flexibility and the splits and the flips and all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
some of the wushu performances, I guess, right? Yeah. I guess they're fairly similar.
Yeah, wushu stuff. Yeah,
wushu is just, from my understanding, is the term for like Chinese martial arts.
Exactly,
right?
It's like an umbrella term. Yeah, but you wouldn't get people in today's world who, not that I've seen anyway, who compete in Sanda and Taolu.
Sure.
It's kind of broken off. But I think, hundreds of years ago, people would have to learn everything. It was for survival then. Warring tribes would come over. You'd need to know how to wield a stick, sword, staff, and hand-to-hand combat, and do all the acrobatic stuff as well. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. That's interesting. So then you went down the Sanda route. And for people that don't understand, Sanda is essentially Chinese kickboxing. It's got quite an interesting rule set, though, right? It's more so the rule set that governs it.
Let's say think MMA without the ground game. So you can punch, kick, some competitions knee and elbow, sweep, but as soon as it goes to ground, then they stop and stand up, start again. I've seen some interesting videos recently of some of the old masters who gathered together and said, well, how do we take these different components of Chinese martial arts and put them into a combat competitive arena? And they've got major regrets that they didn't add any of the ground game, because there used to be some elements to that. But again, culturally, if a man is down on the floor, it's almost like a respect. If you get up and you want to fight again, okay, you want to fight again, let's go again. But some of the older masters are saying they definitely missed a trick there.
Yeah, I think it's quite a common thing with a lot of striking systems that have a more traditional background, is there's a lot of neglect on the ground because of, like you say, the cultural element of it, where actually that's it. Like if you're on the ground, that's it. You've either lost already, or that man, I've defeated him, and that's it. And that would be the end of a match fight, as it were. You'd be like, too ashamed and you've lost. Whereas we've obviously got the Western grimy mentality of keep smashing that guy's face on the ground.
Yeah, or the Brazilians don't give a shit. That's where it starts for them. But I respect that. I think, fight's a fight.
No, absolutely. Yeah. I'm with you. But it is interesting how you see a lot of styles, I guess particularly Chinese styles that never had that. Like I said, I do a lot of Wing Chun, and I remember hearing someone say about one of these masters in China, in Hong Kong, and they were saying, oh, well, what about ground fighting? He's like, oh, right, like this. And he just kneels on the guy when the guy's on his back, like a knee on belly kind of position. Yeah. And he's like, and I punch him. And that's their idea of ground fighting. There isn't like a playing the bottom like they have with jiu-jitsu things. Yeah. Which is interesting. I guess it's pros and cons, but there's only so much you can learn at one point. Yeah. But going back to Sanda, where you have the throws as well, I understand there's an interesting rule there, because you can only throw if you don't go down with them or something like that. So any sacrifice throws don't work?
That's like a point system thing. You can throw, you can land on top of someone.
Okay.
You can both land, on the floor, or you can throw, they can twist it and they land on you. So if I land on them, I get 2 points. If we both hit the deck and no one lands on each other, no points. And if I initiate the throw, but then he's able to turn it on the air and land on me, then he gets the points. So I put the effort in, and then I've had that in competitions as well, where I've done all the work and then ended up on my back thinking, how did I get hit?
Looking up at the ceiling.
Yeah. So it's a point system, but you can throw, sweep, you can do double legs, single legs, any sort of conventional judo style throws. Sometimes it's difficult if you've got the boxing gloves on because you haven't got the grips. So very similar to sambo, you have to throw and learn different ways to catch people's arms without your
working overhooks and underhooks and all that kind of stuff. That's interesting. Okay, and how did you end up getting into that side of things?
Yeah, well, I wanted to test my skills, and like most people who start martial arts, you start with local amateur competitions, and then when we had success in that, called the Shaolin Tigers, we had a group of us, maybe about 8-10 fighters who all learnt together, got our iron leg, iron jacket conditioning up, and then started to do regional competitions, and then national competitions, and then representing the UK and international competitions. So fighting against the big boys, the Russians, the Chinese in world championships, and then European championships for other countries as well. I think that was my master's main goal, was to train some of us lazy Westerners, go and win a world title, and then he could say to his master, the abbot, mission accomplished.
Job done.
We didn't quite get it done when I competed a long time ago now at the World Championships. I got silver medal. Which was pretty good. No one's ever done that in the UK, but I could still sense the disappointment from my teacher. So you didn't get gold. Why are you smiling? Because obviously it would have been nice for him to go back and say, yep.
I'd say that's still a good effort, though.
I appreciate that.
You can't be too upset about that.
I think the thing for him is my teacher's the 34th generation Shaolin monk. So that knowledge has been passed from masters to student for 1,500 years. And obviously, the better you are as a martial artist, as a master, then your karma, is your dharma, rather, your life's purpose is to then find a student or students who are as good or better than you. Otherwise, the martial art dissolves and diminishes over time. So in a sense, my teacher was one of the best, or the best Sanda fighter. So the abbot sent his best to the UK. So it was a big undertaking for him to say, well, how am I going to get these lazy people who haven't started at 4 years old?
I've never done anything.
To go and achieve some high-level stuff. So that was that.
That is interesting. Because my understanding is a lot of Chinese martial arts are quite familial. It's like a father-son relationship almost, right?
Yeah.
Is it the same for Shaolin?
Yeah, well... there's obviously like martial arts
uncles
families, and then a lot of stuff is learned in-house, should we say. But those who travel to the Shaolin Temple would have to wait. I think my teacher, he was only 15 or 16, he was very late. He was learning from his father, like you said. And then he had to wait for 6 months until someone gave him the nod outside the temple to say, okay, you've shown enough mental willingness, fortitude, that you're taking this seriously, and let him in.
Oh, wow.
So that was every day, they notice him, ignore him, and then one day say, okay, you can do it. Wow. And then when they give the names out to to the students. They look at your character, and then you get appointed a name. So our teacher, Shifu Yanzi, means unwavering dedication. I don't give the names out lightly. So he'd be the first one training in the morning, last one training to go to bed. And then his brother, Shifu Yanlei, means relentless thunder.
Wow, okay, that's a cool name. I'll take that.
And I'll show you some photos of him as well. Some magazine articles have said his body looks like it's been cut out of solid jade or something. So yeah. So yeah, I mean, even talking about this now almost gives me goosebumps to think how, it's such a cliche when say when the student's ready, the master will come.
Yeah.
But how blessed was I to be some guy living in London and then have two of the world's best monks on my door ready to impart their knowledge to me.
Yeah, that is amazing.
And I can't believe
that's your first exposure to martial arts as well, was it? Had you done anything before?
Yeah, like most kids. I did karate when I was young.
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
it wasn't taken too seriously. I did love it. I've always planned on getting back into martial arts, but this was a real blessing. So, I mean, without meaning to diminish other schools, other teachers, I have been to plenty of academies, and teaching as anything can vary, but to have that, everyone thinks of the monks being these serene, peaceful people, which they are, but when the training's happening, it's militant.
I bet.
I've been in tears of pain. Especially the iron jacket. The first level, you have to make your skin conditioned. So you have to slap your bare hand or someone else slapping on you to your red raw. And then after a few weeks, you go deeper into the layers, and then you pick up a stick with kind of like flayed ends to it.
I've seen some of these gnarly tools.
And you rub this it's called red flower oil. It's like medicinal oil, and do the qigong with it.
Sure.
But the first few months are brutal. And you just think, how am I ever going to get there? And you have to hold your hands behind your head like this and keep them there while your friend slaps you. And if the teacher sees that they're not slapping you, don't make me come out there and slap you myself. And I mean, brutal. But then
it is.
Every day that goes by, you're like, well, I survived today. Let's see how tomorrow goes.
And how regularly would you do that, like iron conditioning?
Every day. Yeah, just like brushing your teeth. It becomes a lifestyle. Yeah.
Horrendous.
Yeah.
Do you still keep that stuff up?
To a certain extent. I still practice the qigong, but not ever since I stopped competing. It takes a long time. It took at least minimum an hour a day to do legs.
An hour of just beating yourself up.
Well, it's quite therapeutic actually. It does kind of release. I don't know if you've ever done like cold ice baths and stuff like that.
Yeah, a couple times.
Is that pleasure pain thing?
Yeah.
It
sucks while you're doing it, but you're actually I feel quite good after.
And in a weird sadomasochistic kind of way, it's kind of euphoric after a while.
Sure.
You get past that pain barrier and you actually feel alive and really, really good.
I'll take your word for that. I'm not into that. But no, it's super interesting because that's so integrated into that culture. Like I was saying, you get that kind of stereotype of, all the Shaolin monks doing the crazy body conditioning and bone conditioning and skin conditioning and all the various things. It's interesting to hear actually, it is something that you do practice and it is something you do and you do get better at. And I imagine it probably helps quite a lot when you're actually in your Sanda competitions, right?
Yeah.
You're like, okay, whatever, I'll walk straight through that shit.
That's it, yeah. You don't fear the shin-on-shin kick as much. Yeah. But there's levels to it. I got to a stage where we had, we've got the... have you ever heard of the movie, The 36 Chambers of Shaolin? Yeah. So every chamber has a different skill set. So in the Shaolin Temple, UK, in Tufnell Park, there's an area outside with bamboo stakes set into the ground, a few meters apart. And they've got different thicknesses of felt, like rubber, wrapped around them till they get thinner and thinner and thinner till you get to the pure bamboo at the last stake. Yeah. So we used to have to do 1,000 kicks every day, each leg. And then after a while, you move on till you can hammer that bamboo, raw bamboo. And then after a while, you think, okay, well, if I can hit that, it should be okay. Battle tested to go into competition.
Yeah, I'll say. I guess that's quite similar to Muay Thai as well, where they do a lot of shin conditioning. But you guys do it all over.
I think there's a difference. Correct. I mean, maybe obviously these Muay Thai guys, mad respects. They've got crazy conditioning, but I'm not sure about the longevity that these guys have as they get into their later years in life. Because I don't know in Thai boxing whether they have a similar internal training skill set like Qigong.
Yeah. No,
so these guys rubbing baseball bats and bottles up and down the shin. But I think when you see some of these old masters in their 70s and 80s, obviously people's bodies naturally start to degenerate.
There's only so much you can do about that.
But I do think that our teachers say, internal and external is like both sides of the palms of your hand. You can't have one without the other. Mm-hmm. So to have the breath and the body and the Qigong control, as well as the conditioning on the outside, there's a kind of synthesis that happens. I don't think I'm ever going to worry about arthritis or brittle bones in my legs, that's for sure.
No, I think you're safe on that one.
Yeah.
But that is quite interesting, because I have heard other practitioners from Chinese styles talk about that, and there's definitely, even if you look at it from like a modern science point of view, in terms of our understanding of how the body works with tendon strength and all the ligaments and things, not only are you practicing that, but with the Qigong and things, especially, I know at least with Tai Chi, there's a lot of holding poses and things and strengthening ligaments and things that are really key to those movements. Yeah. I guess I'm going to take a punt and say you've done a lot of sitting in a horse stance in your time.
Yeah.
That's the common one, but it's so good for you. And even like modern day sports science people are saying, actually, go hold that like a deep squat like that for a few minutes a day, and it will do wonders for all your ligaments and tendons and the stabilization for your legs.
I think a lot of these things have to be experienced as well, because you could see someone standing there in a park with their arms like this breathing, and you think, if anyone can do that. And you try it and you practice the right breathing, and after a while, these static poses, isometric poses,
they are horrendous.
Your body's screaming, and then all that tightness and blocked energy after a while starts to open up, and you feel like your whole vibration starts to raise.
Yeah.
So it's a very introspective but rewarding experience to do that type of training. But it has, like I said, it has to be experiential. Like our teachers never used to let people come in and watch, because you just think, what's that all about?
I had the similar thing. I hadn't ever really played with any Tai Chi or Qigong or anything like that, and I was at a camp in Thailand, and it was a bit of a mixed martial arts camp. We did a bit of everything, and in the morning they had one of the instructors was running a Tai Chi session. And the rest of the day was all back to back, like you do kickboxing, then grappling, and then Wing Chun, and then whatever. So it was a very intense day. And to be honest, in the mornings, a lot of the time, the Tai Chi, I was like, do you know what? I'm not that bothered. I'm not here for that stuff. It's interesting to see, but not my cup of tea. I'm going to save my energy, and I'm going to train these other things. And then the first time I was like, fuck it. I'm feeling energetic this morning. I went to that Tai Chi class. All we did was standing in about 3 poses. I am shaking all over. It was one of the hardest training sessions I've ever had. And it's like you say, it's having that control, like every part of you is vibrating.
For sure,
It's a whole new experience. And I was like, Jesus Christ, I will never look lightly on Tai Chi again.
For sure. We used to train 4 hours a day for our afternoon, evening sessions. And sometimes if I was running late, the Qigong class was the first class. So even though I was training an hour less, I'd be so much more tired than if I trained that extra hour with the Qigong first, because it's like filling up the battery, charging up before you go, and you could really feel a difference.
Wow, that's interesting. It's not something I know that much about and haven't really looked at, but even just that little experience was definitely one of those eye-opener things.
Useful too. I used to have to cut weight, as most people do, for getting your weight category for competitions, and obviously when you're dehydrated, I've got relatively high blood pressure anyway. For some reason, my blood pressure would go sky high. So they put the blood pressure thing on and say, Will, I'm sorry, your blood pressure is too high to compete. So I say, okay, can you give me 15, 20 minutes? I go to the car park, I practice some Qigong breathing and really slow my whole body, heartbeat down, come back in, give him the arm, put it on, and he'd be tapping his equipment. And he'd say, I don't know what's happened here, but okay, you're good to fight.
Wow.
So that's been useful going into like the stunt career in the movie industry, when you're standing at the top of a high building or something where you just need a process just to calm your body down, stay centered, and then off you go.
That's so interesting. And so is that how you got into the stunt career, or is that something already in the works?
I think there's a few of us who trained at the Shaolin Temple and then moved on to become stunt performers, members of the British Stunt Register. All the time we were competing, that was our main focus. But then we used to do sort of extras work and stuff.
Sure.
And chatted to stunt performers. I thought, that's fascinating. And then just decided as a team, we're going to do the training. And,
oh wow! So you guys did it as a group, your fight team and your stunt team.
5 of us. Yeah, yeah. Which is
awesome.
a lot easier to train as a crew because you have to pick 6 disciplines to become a stunt performer. We didn't have much money at the time, so we went for all the cheap ones. So if you know your boys are going training at 6 in the morning to go swimming, you don't want to be the guy still in bed. So kind of held each other accountable to do the training. Yeah.
Ah, that's really interesting. So when you say disciplines, that's like types of stunts that you could do.
Yeah, you need 6 qualifications. Fortunately, the one that's mandatory is some form of martial arts. So that was already ticked off. And then anything from, I did swimming, rock climbing, high diving, trampolining, scuba diving.
Oh, wow.
But other people, you know, they're horse riders or rally drivers, or, you know, that's their own niche, which is great to come from a martial arts, a life of martial arts, to a melting pot of other extremely talented people in other areas. It's good to keep you humble, you know.
Well, that's the thing. You get some incredible people doing some of those things that are specialists in, you know, whatever, free diving or whatever it might be. And you're like, holy shit, how do you do that? Yeah. And equally, I'm sure they'll do the same thing for you with your
True. I love being on set. So we've got some time off. There's always someone who's got a skill set that we can always exchange some skills. So
that's really
it doesn't feel like work for us a lot of the time. It's just good fun, yeah.
And you've worked on some really cool projects as well. I think even last week, or maybe the week before, we were talking about it before, you're about to go film some bare knuckle fight and things like that.
Yeah, that went
well. So interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of the American movies are all getting made here in the UK. It's booming at the moment, even though there's writers and actors strikes at the moment. But yeah, all the big Marvel stuff, Fast and Furious, Bond, Game of Thrones. We're blessed again, it's all happening here, so no shortage of work. They're building studios all over the country, multi-million pound deal, so it's obviously here to stay for the next 10, 20 years, I'd say, provided AI doesn't ruin everything.
Somehow figure that out. And so you obviously do a variety of things within that stunt performance. Do you tend to focus on doing like martial arts based things, or whatever work comes along is what you do?
I mean, you have to be quite versatile. That's the thing that sets the British stunt register apart from, say, the American way of doing things, is that everyone has to be proficient in a wide skill set. So if they say, okay, Tom, we need you to drive, and then the next scene we need to fall out this window, we need to set you on fire, or work with animals, or be underwater.
A wild sentence in itself.
You've got to do that. But in America, they say, okay, we need a motorcyclist. Let's go to Nitro Circus and pick the best guys here. And they might be specific in one, whereas we're more generalist. But yeah, in general, over the last 8 years or so, the fight stuff, and more recently fight choreographies, where I really feel at home.
Cool. Well, I guess it makes sense, and it's a good way to keep that passion going, even if you're not necessarily like competing or doing whatever. At least you still get to do something in that industry using those skills, which is great.
And the creative element of it as well is nice.
So you get to choreograph a lot of the routines?
Starting to now, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. So, and obviously different styles of stuff. That's one of the reasons why I started BJJ, is that I had limited experience of the ground game. So every time I go there, in my mind, it's work as well. I'm studying. It could be useful for different fight scenes later on as well.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because you can tell the understanding of the movements, because you've got so much background in other martial arts and such a discipline with like body control and things like that. You can tell that you've got that. Like, you're way further ahead in the jiu-jitsu journey than you've got any right to be.
I appreciate that.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, from the time that you've been doing it to your skill level is like huge disparity. And it's really interesting to see, because you can tell that you've got something there, but you're not grappled. And that's what's so unique. And I think I would probably say it's got to come down to that element of that body control and like the strength and the discipline from Shaolin and things like that. It's so interesting to see how that translates across. Like, you just walk through most people in that class.
Well, I'm a white belt. I'd like to point that out. So it's a long way yet. But it's nice to have a new skill set to learn. Nice to be the bottom of the rank when everyone lines up to be the white belt with 0 stripes, and then eventually build
slowly climb up. Yeah,
I'm fascinated by jiu-jitsu. I love the wide array of people that it gathers, from the extreme
it's really cool little culture
to the meatheads, and everyone has a place there. And it is a high level game of chess. And every time we go, we realise I love that feeling of the more you study, the more you realize you don't know much at all.
Yeah.
But that is a knowing, is an understanding in itself. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
I think with provided you roll with the right people, jiu-jitsu will see me out. You know, this would be something I could do right up into my latter years. Whereas the Thai boxing, you know, it's only so long you want to get that elbowed in the teeth.
You up. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. And did you ever hop across and try any other styles? Like, I know you mentioned earlier, you did some K1. Is that, would you just take kind of whatever fights you could and adapt to the rule set?
Yeah,
because you're quite general with Sanda.
Yeah, we used to fight kickboxing, Muay Thai, and then sometimes they put on super fights. So it'd be Sanda and Muay Thai rules kind of combined. So you could do the hip throws, but then they could also throw the elbows, and we'd merge the two.
Yeah, I have to figure some of that shit out.
And then we had a chat before the podcast. I'm kind of obsessed about the Eskrima as well, the Filipino stick fighting. And I think once you kind of understand leverage, whether it's with a stick, whether it's Shaolin, Muay Thai, or BJJ, there's certain principles that you can live by. I like to keep everything quite simplified because there's so many things to learn. It can be quite daunting, can't it? So I need basic concepts.
Concepts, principles are my big thing because, like you, I try and like train a lot and understand everything that's going on. But after a while, you're like, oh, if you remember, this technique needs this grip and this position and this and this, and this technique needs this and this and this. It gets so much to retain. I just try to remember a few main things and hope that'll see me through.
Don't you think we're living in a crazy time though? Even when I was doing my swimming training for the stunt register, I said, okay, who's the best swimmer in the world? Michael Phelps. Let's go on YouTube, see what he's got to say about, you know, butterfly or front crawl. And then you just think, for free, I'm literally having a one-to-one with the best in the world.
Yeah, you get that insight into
BJJ. You know, John Danaher, who's a wizard.
Yeah.
You could just sit there for as long as you want to watch these things.
Yeah, it's just like being able to pick their brains.
I'm 43 now, so finding martial arts knowledge and then separating the wheat from the chaff between what's, you know, charlatans, what's real, what's going to work. I remember UFC 1. But now, when you see these young kids who are, you know, early teens, who flying arm bars.
And wizards, some of them.
But do you think that martial arts now is, like in terms of MMA, for example, is the best that it has ever been historically in terms of fighting ability? Because there's just so much information that's now merged as a sort of perfect system.
Yeah, I think it's fair. Yeah, I think you're right, because the thing is, you're right. There's so much information out there and so much you can learn now. But the only thing I say is, I wonder sometimes if when you're first starting out, that can be so overwhelming. Like, I was definitely guilty of it for jiu-jitsu, where I'm just pouring through YouTube for like a couple hours a day. And I'd be, look at this technique and this technique. And I'm trying to remember all these things and I try and do them. And then I just suck at everything.
Yeah.
But there's almost an argument of up to a certain point, like your beginner stages, pick something, just do everything you're told exactly as you're told. And then go and explore and like learn all the things. Because there is so much information out there. And I think as a whole, martial arts is probably better for it because it's a lot easier to, like you say, sorting wheat from chaff. You've got the knowledge of all these great guys and a lot more access to evidence of how it all works. Whereas previously you wouldn't have had that. You're always relying on faith. So, you know, why do you do this technique this way? Because Sifu says.
Yeah.
And that's the end. Well, maybe that guy's not all he's cracked up to be. And it's just people buy into this like cult of personality. So I think it's really good for holding people accountable now. Because you quickly know if
Aikido has probably become slightly exposed ever since UFC's became a thing, for sure.
That's the thing. There's a few martial arts where you see this plummet. And it tends to pick up people that don't give a shit about martial arts, but they go because they want to learn about self-defense or something like that. And that's where a lot of those arts tend to like scoop people up to start with, but rarely longevity. But fighting, if you look at it as like combat sports versus self-defense, I think it's been amazing.
What do you think the future holds then? Because I don't know if you've seen, there's obviously UFC is the pinnacle of MMA and has been, you know, since its inception, really. But then there's all these offshoots. I don't know if you ever saw M1, which is medieval fighting. Where the guy's in
I've
full
seen.
armor.
Yeah, I didn't know.
And then you've got like 5-on-5, which is the kind of
the crazy Russian
stuff.
shit. And they're doing fights in phone booths,
fights in cars with the seatbelts on.
I love the car jitsu.
Yeah, and you've seen the parkour one as well. So they've got like a rat's maze with like high, kind of foam padding walls and stuff, and then 5 guys, and it's just mayhem. And then the slap fighting, it's all, those are sort of entertainment. But I am curious to know in the next 10, 20 years, in terms of martial artists, what, who's going to be the next,
Well, I reckon there'll be styles of martial arts that start to pop up more successfully, like where people haven't had that interest. Like when you look at the inception of the UFC, right, it fundamentally comes down to you have wrestlers, you have like Muay Thai guys, and you have Jiu-Jitsu guys. Yeah. Other than that, you didn't really have very much going on. And so a lot of the cultures of those martial arts now have led more towards that. Whereas I think that any of those could easily have been substituted for other martial arts if someone else had done them at that time.
Yeah.
So if you look at wrestling is just basically clinching. Well, use a different clinch martial art. I'm losing one off the top of my head, but you have a substitute for that as a clinch fighting. Muay Thai is essentially the striking system that was there. Well, substitute that for something else. Karate, Sanda, whatever. And then suddenly that would be way more successful. Yeah. And grappling, I'll give the ground fight to Jiu-Jitsu. I don't know anyone else that'll do any better.
Sure. But don't you think there's this come in certain phases when Conor McGregor came hot out the blocks, striking seemed to be a very prevalent way to win fights. And then Khabib came along with the Dagestani, grappling, wrestling.
Fucked everyone.
And Khamzat Chimaev, who just looks at the moment to be unstoppable.
Yeah.
It definitely comes in phases, like, but I think you have to have, all aspects covered these days to reach even a mediocre level of
there's
MMA.
No way that you can get. In fact, we had Luca sat down and did the podcast as well, and he was talking about when he was competing in MMA, and he was saying that there is no way that you can get away nowadays with just being really good at one style. It doesn't exist anymore. Those days are gone. So now I think the difference will be, okay, you're good at Sanda, that's your style, but you also still need to grapple and things. So when you have that base, then you can add that Sanda flavor. And that's where I think that's interesting. That's the fighters that are interesting to me are normally the ones that are a bit different. Everyone that just learns like MMA as its own martial art, they're all kind of the same because it's like, okay, this is how you stand, this is how you move. What I love is seeing people move differently and like, oh, that's what, like that's something totally different. Like Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, love his stuff because he's so different, but he's so good. He's still like, granted, he's had a few whiffs recently. But like his striking is still second to none. And he's one of the older guys on the UFC roster, but he's just so unique, so interesting to see how they move. I love that. As a bit of a martial arts dork, that's
I think
where I get it.
What was quite difficult for me to get my head around was with the Shaolin ethos. It was all about being humble, not being too braggadocious about skills, respecting your opponents, which I still think is very important. But when you get to the business side of things, people want quirky personalities. They want people shit talking. They want all the rest of it. So I've kind of entered this realm, especially after Conor came on the scene. The master at shit talking and psychological warfare. That there's an emphasis on having to be a eccentric personality to couple with the skills. So that's an interesting thing. Is that necessary? Well, from a business perspective, it probably is. But at the same time, we're now getting here in Kingston. We've got Mark, our head coach at Kingston Jiu-Jitsu, who's organised BJJ for kids at school. And for me, I would have died to have that growing up. But to think that the skill set in the martial arts is one thing, but now we've got a whole generation of people learning the values of respect, discipline, delayed gratification, teamwork. So I think that almost as a byproduct of this kind of martial arts, BJJ or whatever, sweeping the world, maybe it's going to turn us into better people. Maybe that's the optimistic side.
Very optimistic.
I mean, you know, we live in London. There's knife crime is rife here.
Yeah.
But if people could solve their differences in the old school fashion, and then once the fight's done, it's done, or maybe even not have to get into a fight because people's egos are in check because they can do that on the mats. And if
that's the thing. That's what's probably best about martial arts in that sense is that the people that get into it, especially at a young age, you have so much discipline instilled in you, and you get a lot of these like life lessons pretty early on mats and things. You don't tend to grow up to be an arsehole.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah.
Sometimes, you know, it's not 100% success.
I think it would be very hard, and of course there's exceptions to the rule, to find a real wanker of a BJJ black belt.
Yeah.
Because the amount of times their ego's been humbled, that symbolise death by having to tap, you're someone's bitch. I mean, thousands and thousands of times.
Yeah.
It would be an extraordinary person to be a real dick.
And the persistence it would take to still be a dick. Especially jiu-jitsu. You're talking like 10 years plus to be a black belt. Like, you've got to be really committed to being an arsehole.
Exactly.
Do that for 10 years.
Yeah, for sure.
And not soften up in the slightest.
So I'm kind of excited about the future of martial arts for the planet. I think, you know, in a time, it's very easy to be critical of the younger generation, and we're all addicted to our phones and social media, and everyone has to be their own brand. There's all this pressure on kids today. But to go back to the kind of the reminder that we're physical beings, well, we're spiritual beings inhabiting a physical body, shall I say, but we still are, you know, we're primates who've, you know, evolved from that, and we still all have physical bodies, and we need to respect it and learn how to use it. I think it's great that there's a resurgence of that. Yeah,
it's definitely picking up in popularity now, even with like the younger generation, where even kids at the age that are like, oh, I don't really give a shit about anything. You see them actually, they get quite into boxing or kickboxing or whatever it might be, and it's good for them. Like, there'll be a period where they're probably arseholes. We'll go through it.
Yeah.
But like, it's really good that martial arts is got such a big platform now, because it almost, I guess it probably peaks and troughs. But it's interesting to see that there is popularity towards it, and it keeps growing even with younger people. And I think what's telling is probably not necessarily like the kids that are doing it, because there's always been loads of kids, you know, you stick, like you and I, you stick your kid in karate as a kid, and you do that for a couple of years. But when you look now and you get like teenagers don't normally give a shit about anything. But now, I mean, our club's quite good for it. We've got quite a lot of really good, like, teenage kind of age people, and they are killers. And the thing is, if I wish I'd started training when I was like mid-teens or something, and it would help my life enormously.
For sure, yeah.
The difference is so good.
Yeah, I'm hopeful. I think this. I think it, like I said earlier, it will change our culture. And I used to run a program for 18 to 25 young offenders who've been to Borstal, and teach them Shaolin Kung Fu. And a lot of people were saying, why are you teaching these young violent men how to fight? And of course it wasn't about that. Some of these kids had never had someone give them attention, give them time, show them that they're worthy, show them that, you know, someone believed in them. And you know, even if I managed to change one or two of their mindsets, that they might not pick up a knife or repeat offend, it was the highlight of my week, actually. I used to be a personal trainer as well. I used to train with bankers, lawyers and all that, but training those young kids once or twice a week for the course of 10 weeks or so for a program was one of the best things that I had the opportunity to do, actually. I could see some of my rebellious self in them, and to think that, you know, this is a way out of that life that they probably through no fault of their own were enmeshed in.
And I suppose it's also good for them to have someone like you that is a fighter, and, you know, you're like, look, you garner a lot of respect as a fighter automatically, especially with, I guess, like younger kids. But having someone to like look up to and have them teach that makes such a difference. Like having someone there that you're like, actually, I want to learn from this guy, not just like, oh, I'm on this program and I have to do it. I really want to learn this and that from whatever. And some of the successes you've had must be amazing.
Yes, I think it's interesting too about especially being a man in today's world. I don't know how far down this rabbit hole we want to go down, but the idea is that, can young men, we are different to women in general on a scale of, how much we solve our differences through, physicality, and we need a physical outlet. I just think that it's a good thing, and we shouldn't shy away from violence in that respect, so long as it's honed. To use that cliche, it's better to be a warrior in the garden than a
gardener in the war.
Thank you. Yeah,
that's the one.
So I think it's good that everyone has the capacity to do those things, but whether they have the ability to restrain where need to be and protect the family and friends where need to be as well, I think is one of the most important things that we can do. But we shouldn't shy away from teaching people how to be strong. And
I think violence gets a bad name because of the things people connote with it. They think it's all these, dark, shadowy figures and people being terrible. But violence doesn't need to be like a taboo thing. I like to talk about it as like it's a tool, right? Because people need it for self-defense. Like, you don't want to be in a self-defense situation unwilling to use violence when the person is using violence against you. That's not an equal playing field. And again, you're right, there is a huge fucking rabbit hole that you can go down with all of this stuff. But it's important, I think, that everyone relaxes around violence a little bit in a weird way. Like, as a fighter, one of the biggest things is just getting used to like having things coming at you and punch in the face. And when you actually relax and you're not super tense all the time and like throwing everything 100%, actually you're like, okay, now that's how you can start to do what you're good at and how you find your skills. Otherwise you tend to be too solid and clammed up. And I think everyone freezes up around violence. The idea of violence is such a taboo subject. No one wants to talk about it, but it's important to not only talk about it, but also expose yourself to it. I think everyone should at some point in their life have some experience in martial arts. Spend 6 months training something, and it'll probably change your life, even in a small way, but just the way you think about things, even if all it does is show you how powerless you are.
For sure,
that will make you infinitely safer than if you walk around thinking you're the big I am and, unstoppable based on nothing.
Sure. When you were saying that, I was thinking one of my favorite quotes is adversity introduces a man to himself. So I think that a lot of the time, if we play safe and we sit at home, computer games, room temperature on, nice and cozy, and we never experience any of those extremes, we don't really get to see what we're capable of. So even like I mentioned earlier, ice baths, or going outside when it's freezing cold with just a t-shirt and shorts on, or just going through the pain barrier.
Do hard things.
When we really get to what at the time can be considered, painful, uncomfortable, horrendous, the brain is phenomenal afterwards, thinking that was so exhilarating, that was amazing, fuck, I want to do that again, I'm going to go back next week. I just think that's really important for people to start pushing those boundaries. And there's a whole wealth of people who are inspiring, the David Goggins, the Jocko Willits, all these people who are really Wim Hof, pushing people to the edge, pushing themselves to the edge, whether it's 200-mile run through the Sahara Desert, or
crazy shit.
Alex Honnold with his free solo rock climbing.
Yes, I've seen that guy.
These people seem to be going into some sort of enhanced hyper state. I don't know if it's a meditative state, but it's definitely an altered state. Whether it's being
your average
present
Joe.
or but I think sometimes that can be the gateway to like a higher level of consciousness. And everyone's got their own way of doing it, whether it's playing music, performing on stage, but some of these extreme sporting things really, I think, is like a fast track way of
I guess you tap into that like primal side of things, right? When you do those hard things, it's normally about activating like all those survival instincts that you've had from when we actually needed to survive and we didn't have the room temperature central heating and things like that. But I love all of that stuff, and it's so interesting. And I guess it feeds hugely into the culture of Shaolin by the sounds of it. That's a huge component from what you said.
For sure, yeah. especially when you're in the middle of a fight, you haven't got time to think, I wonder how that Netflix series is, the last episode's going. You have to be present.
Yeah.
And I'm interested in the notion of presence. You know, Eckhart Tolle, Power of Now, all this kind of. I do think it is a gateway, and sometimes, to go back to the earlier point, we're so distracted with mobile phones and just the monkey mind, they call it. That there's always something, that internal dialogue chipping away, negative thoughts, something that just kind of take you away from the present moment. Mine's funny the way it does that. I haven't quite figured out why we have that egoic or monkey mind. It never stops though.
Yeah.
I think even people who've, I don't know, if they become enlightened or they can exist in a state of higher vibrational consciousness. You know, they still say, no, that internal monkey mind is still constantly chattering. And that's why I say that meditation is a practice. It's not something you complete or fulfill, or you've ticked the box, you've defeated the end of level badly. Something about our internal workings is that's always going to be that chattering mind there. So I'm fascinated by any sort of person who undergoes a process in which they can find a way to center themselves, eliminate that chatter, and just be in a state of being, even if it's short-lived for a few minutes on a fight or whatever. It's that's why I've got mad respect for anyone who gets in the ring, win, lose, fight well, fight terribly. To actually put yourself through the fire like that and experience that it gets my respect. Yeah.
No, it's very interesting. And I guess, do you still focus on that meditative side of things as well? Because I know you said you still practice your Qigong and things. Do you have that as part of your meditation practice, or you have like a seated meditation? Because I know there's all sorts. Yeah. I'm not well versed in meditations, but
I think it's quite easy to think that meditation needs to be something where you have to sit by yourself in a quiet room and just be still. And of course that is effective and it's a good way of working. But even, you know, reminders to focus on your breathing or all those things when you can be in a group of people in a social situation or even on the mats. Some sort of process to get you into a state where other people don't even know that you might be consciously changing your state of being is really important. I like to get up early at before dawn or 6 o'clock, go into my garden, still dark, and just train in the mornings. And I find that brings me into a nice state. And then a few minutes of like conscious breathing towards the end. This is definitely a good way to start my day.
I've heard loads of people say, especially like breathing practices, because breathing is super interesting. And again, there's like a big rabbit hole you can go down. I've read a couple of books and things on these, but there's a lot of breath work that's incorporated into a lot of traditional martial arts, and there's a lot going for it. I think the breath work has such an incredible control over the body. Just on a purely physiological idea. And it's so interesting to see how it's been embedded in some older styles like Shaolin and things like that. Because again, Qigong is all very much about the breath and the flow and things like that. And for whatever reason that you're doing it for, again, I don't really know much about those types of arts. But whatever reason you're doing it for, there is a good, undeniable physical benefit to it. And it is something that I tried to start playing with a little bit. I've been terrible on it recently, but doing more breath work and things like that. And it definitely makes a difference to how you're feeling and
it's free too.
Yeah.
The pharmaceutical company
all for the free trading.
I mean, you think how many people label themselves as depressed or whatever, but how many people are making a conscious decision to eat healthy, eat less sugars, get some sunshine on their bodies, go out and breathe fresh air, be with nature. Practice breathing, practice solitude for a bit, practice the shock of ice baths or sweating profusely through intense physical exercise. And I'm sure, you know, there are people who seriously have, clinical issues.
Sure,
But I wouldn't be surprised if 90% of the people could be on the way to solving those issues for free without the pharmaceutical industry having to get involved and, you know, radically change their lifestyle through all these things that have been known for eons, that are easily accessible at any time. You could be in prison, you could be in a monastery, you could still reach the same level of internal understanding, for sure.
Yeah, and that's interesting. And that's something, again, not that many people look into, is that internal element, especially nowadays, like more modern combat sport type things. No nods to that. A lot of Chinese martial arts will have that kind of thing, and Japanese as well, I believe. I haven't really trained much. But it's interesting that there isn't so much focus on that nowadays. But there is a lot of, I'm not going to say evidence, but like a focus on the culture and how that changes people's lives. So I don't know if you've ever seen, there's a thing I follow on Instagram, I think they're called Mat Made or something, Made on the Mat, something like that. And it's all jiu-jitsu practitioners, but it's people talking about how martial arts and jiu-jitsu in particular have affected or changed their lives in like a better way. And you hear loads of stories just like that, where you have people that have been depressed or something like that, and they've come and they've found jiu-jitsu in their training, and then they just become obsessed with it. And it's a real testament to how martial arts can really positively impact your life. And again, depending on what you want from it, because I don't think anyone really goes to martial arts looking for that, as it were. It's not really what you expect. 99% of the time, people are going there for self-defense or as a new hobby, I guess, to get a bit fitter. But then what you find there is super interesting. But if you went to a more traditional martial art like Shaolin or something like that, I'm sure there's a lot that you could gain from that.
Yeah, I've seen some of those mat-made videos. They are inspiring. Soldiers coming back with PTSD.
Yeah.
And people starting jiu-jitsu in their 50s and 60s. Eventually end up getting their black belt or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, it gives me hope that there's always, no matter what age you are, what disability you might have, that there's a path available for anyone, really. And I'm sure, I think Coca-Cola's brand plan, I heard this years ago, was that anywhere in the world someone should be able to buy a Coca-Cola within 20 meters or something like that. So I think we'll get to the stage where anyone can pick up martial arts, and there'll be a dojo or a training place in their town or village, and it'll be accessible. Or even, like we were saying earlier, online, that there's no excuse not to help yourself these days, I think.
Well, there is so much access as well to these online schools and things as well now, especially since the pandemic. The amount of lessons or courses that are available has gone through the roof, because people have realized actually there's another way to teach and there's another way to learn. It's never going to be the same as getting in and getting your hands dirty, as it were. But having this knowledge and access, like we were saying earlier, access to all these incredible teachers that, they might be someone that lives on the other side of the world. I can't go over there regularly and train with them. But you can have a course, or you do video calls or whatever, and actually there's still a lot that you can gain from that and put into your own training. So it's, I really like that. And I think it's the idea that everything can grow and move forward. And like you said, hopefully everyone can have a crack at martial arts. I think that's a nice way to wrap it up there, to be honest, Will. Really appreciate your time. Super interesting to learn. For anyone listening, I'll put links to your Instagram and things like that, so you can check out some of your training. I have seen some of your crazy sunrise training videos and things. Respect it. I'm not about that, but I'll respect it anyway.
Nice one. I appreciate that, Tom.
Thank you for coming. To you, mate. And it was awesome.
Nice one. See you on the mat soon then.
Thank you for listening. I really hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. It was great fun having a conversation with Will. Super interesting guy. Please do check out his social media. Also, please support the podcast. Follow our Instagram, YouTube, and Spotify at CWAMA Podcast. And share this with another martial artist, and let's spread the word. Thanks very much. See you next time.